Seth Rollins is back, and he's not alone. His brand new faction just shook the foundations of WWE RAW. After weeks of speculation and cryptic teasers, the Visionary has finally made his return to Monday Night Raw, and what he brought with him will change the landscape forever. In this explosive episode, we break down Seth Rollins' shocking comeback, reveal every member of his new faction, and explore what this means for the WWE Universe going into SummerSlam. Expect drama, betrayal, unexpected alliances, and the rise of a new powerhouse stable that might just challenge the Bloodline. It didn't begin with fireworks. No music. No pyro. Just a camera, slightly off angle, catching something it shouldn't have. A flicker in the crowd. A ripple of disbelief. And then, an eruption. Because what happened on Monday Night Raw wasn't part of the show. Not exactly. It was something else. Something the production truck wasn't ready for, something that caught even the announcers off guard. Seth Rollins was back. But this wasn't the Seth Rollins we knew. For weeks, the air backstage had changed. WWE staff whispered about strange messages taped to locker room doors, handwritten, cryptic, always signed with the same thing, a burning eye drawn in red ink. Production assistants reported seeing figures moving in shadows after tapings ended. Security claimed nothing showed up on camera, but something had shifted in the air. As if the Visionary was watching. Waiting. Then came the glitches. Short bursts of static during matches. Flickering lights. The Titantron briefly showing a masked silhouette standing in a cathedral of flames. Some dismissed it as technical issues. Others weren't so sure. 1 week before his return, Corey Graves leaned in close to Michael Cole between commercials and muttered, "That's not a production error. That's a signal." The kind of signal that meant something was coming. Or someone. But no one expected this. Not after what had happened. Because just 2 months ago, Seth Rollins disappeared. No warning. No farewell speech. No backstage segment. One night, he was WWE's most polarizing figure, the World Heavyweight Champion, the architect of chaos. The next? Gone. The only official word came through a quiet statement from Triple H himself. Seth Rollins has sustained a serious knee injury and will be taking time away from in-ring competition to recover. That was all. But behind closed doors, it was never that simple. Sources within the company now say the injury wasn't just physical. Seth was, in their words, shattered. Weeks of pressure. A backstage power struggle. Rumors of betrayal. And above all, the weight of being the only man left standing against Solo Sikoa's bloodline after Roman Reigns' collapse. For the first time in over a decade, Seth Rollins, the man who had burned down the Shield, reinvented himself 100 times, and danced through every era of WWE like a living contradiction, was broken. And in the silence that followed, the locker room held its breath. Some thought he'd retire. Others said he'd never forgive what happened on that final night, when Paul Heyman turned his back on him. When Bronson Reed ambushed him mid-match, targeting the same knee that had haunted Seth since 2015. When the crowd stood in stunned silence as he was carried out, not like a champion, but like a casualty. And then, on a Monday night that should have been just another stop before SummerSlam, it happened. The lights fell. Not dimmed. Not flickered. Fell. Raw's entire arena plunged into darkness. For nearly 30 seconds, not a single word was said on commentary. Not a single spotlight moved. And then, in complete silence, a single spotlight appeared. Center ring. No music. No announcement. Just a man in a long black coat, head bowed, arms crossed. Seth Rollins. But this wasn't the glittering, cackling Messiah. Not the outlandish drip god. This Seth stood still. Stone-faced. Hair tied back. Beard trimmed. In his eyes, fury. In his presence, control. And flanking him, 3 silhouettes. At first, the crowd didn't recognize them. They weren't expected. Not hyped. Not teased. But when the lights rose, jaws dropped. To Seth's right, J.D. McDonough, face shadowed beneath a black hood, his eyes burning with vindication. To his left, Carmelo Hayes, arms crossed, gold teeth flashing beneath a stone-cold stare. And behind them, towering like a monolith, Ilya Dragunov, shirtless, scar-covered, breathing like a beast uncaged. The message was simple. The visionary had not returned alone. He had built a new church. And these were his disciples. The arena erupted, but not with cheers. It was something else. A mix of disbelief and awe. Because this wasn't just a return. This was a declaration. A shift. A line drawn in the sand. Paul Heyman, watching from the production suite, reportedly stood up from his chair and left the room without saying a word. What no one could understand, yet, was why these men? Why McDonough, a former lackey of the Judgment Day? Why Carmelo, NXT royalty, but untested on the main roster? Why Dragunov, the man many feared but few truly followed? Because Seth Rollins didn't need allies. He needed believers. And these three? They weren't just fighters. They were zealots. Backstage sources would later confirm that Rollins had met privately with each of them in the weeks before Raw. Not at the Performance Center. Not in WWE headquarters. But in undisclosed locations, abandoned arenas, private gyms, even a church outside Tampa where Seth was seen late at night pacing the altar. In those meetings, he didn't pitch them a gimmick. He didn't offer contracts. He asked one question. Do you want to watch the empire burn, or do you want to be the ones who light the match? They said yes. And now, they stood beside him, not as followers, but as equals. The new faction didn't speak. Not at first. Seth raised his microphone and simply said, I know what they did to me. And I know what I'm going to do to them. So tell Solo, tell Heyman, tell the cowards who thought I was finished, the fire doesn't forget. It waits. Then he dropped the mic. The lights fell again. And Raw was never the same. But this wasn't just about revenge. In the days that followed, WWE insiders began to piece together what had really happened during Seth's absence. And what they found painted a much darker picture than anyone expected. Because while the world thought Seth was healing, he was building. Not just a team. A doctrine. A vision of what wrestling should be. No more politics. No more favorites. No more family dynasties choking the air out of opportunity. He didn't just want to beat Solo Sikoa. He wanted to tear down the kingdom. Brick by brick. And now, with a faction as volatile as it is precise, Seth Rollins has returned with a mission not seen since the Shield first cracked the surface of WWE over a decade ago. Except this time, he's not the architect. He's the arsonist. And this time, the match is already lit. They weren't chosen at random. That much became clear almost immediately. Seth Rollins, a master of control, had always built with intention. From the Shield to the Messiah era, every alliance he ever forged had a purpose. But this time it was different. This wasn't about creating a brand. This was about creating a reckoning. A coalition not built on loyalty, but shared resentment. Because these weren't just wrestlers. They were the outcasts. The forgotten. The unclaimed. And at the heart of their origin lies a simple truth. Each of them had been betrayed by the system Seth vowed to destroy. Let's start with the man in the shadows, J.D. McDonough. In the months leading up to Seth's return, J.D. had vanished from television. Word around the locker room was that the Judgment Day had quietly phased him out. No explanation. No confrontation. Just exile. At first, J.D. tried to play it off, claiming he was taking time to evolve. But sources backstage painted a different picture. He had been humiliated. After helping build the faction's momentum, taking beatings for Finn Balor, running interference for Dominic Mysterio, JD was discarded the moment things got crowded. Triple H himself, during a closed-door meeting, is rumored to have told him, "You're talented, but you're not essential." That line haunted JD. One producer later recalled seeing him backstage alone after a taping, sitting in the dark near the loading dock, just staring into nothing. His face blank. His gear still on. He didn't speak to anyone. And when asked if he was okay, he reportedly replied, "Do you think essential people get forgotten?" Weeks later, Seth Rollins appeared outside JD's locker room after an untelevised match. The security footage was scrubbed. But a lone technician caught the last second on a private phone, Seth placing a single black glove in JD's hand. No words. Just a signal. And JD understood. Now, flanking Seth in silence, JD McDonough is no longer a disposable pawn. He's a sniper. The kind of man who strikes without warning. Without fear. The kind of man who, with proper direction, can bring down kings. But Seth didn't just need precision. He needed fire. Enter, Ilya Dragunov. The unbesiegbar. The Mad Dragon. A man who wrestles like every match is a death sentence, and he's ready to die on his feet. But for all his in-ring brilliance, Dragunov had never found a place in WWE's upper hierarchy. Too intense, some said. Too foreign. Too unmarketable for the mainstream. But Seth Rollins didn't care about mainstream. He cared about purpose. Sources reveal that during his recovery, Seth requested footage of NXT Europe tapings. And in one clip, an unaired promo cut by Ilya in a dingy, smoke-filled arena in Berlin, Rollins found his missing piece. Ilya stared directly into the camera and said, "They want to tame me. But I was not built to kneel. I was built to burn." That line played over and over again in Seth's head like a hymn. Ilya had never chased titles. He chased penance. He punished himself as much as he punished his opponents. He was, in every way, a reflection of what Seth had become, driven by pain, shaped by it, unrelenting in the face of silence. The two reportedly met once, in private, before Raw. No agents. No PR. Just two men in a room. What was said has never been confirmed. But Ilya emerged from that meeting shirtless, blood on his hands from punching a brick wall in the training center. He smiled. For the first time in months. Now he follows Seth like a silent guardian. Not because he needs direction, but because, in Seth, he finally sees someone who understands what it means to suffer and choose rage anyway. And finally, there's Carmelo Hayes. The surprise. The wild card. The one no one expected to fall into Seth's ranks. Because Carmelo wasn't broken. At least, not on the surface. He had swagger. Style. Championship pedigree. He had been hailed as a future WrestleMania main eventer. So when he vanished from NXT television weeks before SummerSlam, many assumed it was a planned call-up. But behind the scenes, something very different was happening. Carmelo, sources say, had grown bitter. Promised main roster spotlight. Promised a championship feud. Promised creative freedom. Instead, he watched newer names leapfrog him. He watched his promos get cut, his matches rescheduled, his debut delayed. And then the phone stopped ringing. He wasn't injured. He wasn't released. He was ignored. For a man whose brand was built on confidence, the silence was crushing. That's when Seth reached out. Not with an offer. With a mirror. He reportedly sent Carmelo a message. "You said you were him. But they made you feel like nothing. Let's remind them who you are." The rest is history. Carmelo debuted on Raw not as a high-flying babyface, but as a cold, calculating enforcer. No taunts. No catchphrases. Just a cold stare and an arm around Seth's shoulder. Each man chosen for a reason. JD, the mind. Ilya, the fury. Carmelo, the weapon. Together, they form something new. Something Raw has never seen before. Not just a faction, but an ideology. A movement. A campaign of reckoning. And yet, even as the WWE Universe reels from their arrival, a bigger question looms. Who is this version of Seth Rollins? Gone is the laughter. The flamboyance. The chaos. In its place stands a man refined by betrayal and reborn through strategy. Because while the Bloodline ruled through fear, Seth now operates through conviction. And unlike Solo Sikoa, unlike Paul Heyman, Seth Rollins has nothing left to lose. But there's another layer. One fans aren't talking about. Something that's already begun happening backstage. Because moments after Raw went off the air, a top producer, speaking on condition of anonymity, revealed that Seth had requested a closed meeting with Triple H and Shawn Michaels. No cameras. No talent. Just them. What was said in that room remains sealed. But later that night, a memo circulated internally across the WWE offices. A new phrase was printed on the letterhead. The second vision. What it means, no one knows. But the implications are staggering. Because this isn't just about facing Solo Sikoa at SummerSlam. This may be about replacing him. Not just as champion, but as the face of power. Because what if Seth's not building a faction? What if he's building an empire? The moment the cameras cut to black on Raw, the atmosphere backstage shifted from tension to total chaos. Not in the way people screamed. Not in the way they ran. In the way they didn't. A stunned silence fell across the backstage hallway. Dozens of staff and superstars watched the monitor, frozen. It wasn't the return itself that shocked them. It was how he returned. Who he brought. And what he didn't say. Because Seth Rollins didn't attack anyone. He didn't cut a pipe bomb promo. He didn't challenge Solo Sikoa. Instead, he walked in, made himself known, and left with his new inner circle behind him. It was a statement far more powerful than violence. And no one felt that weight more than Paul Heyman. According to insiders, Heyman was in the gorilla position the entire time, standing stiff, arms folded, face unreadable. The moment Seth appeared, Heyman is said to have reached into his breast pocket and gripped something tightly. What it was, no one knows. But one producer, watching from the side curtain, said Heyman's lips were moving. Repeating a single word over and over. Premature. What did he mean? Was he surprised that Seth returned earlier than expected? Or was it something else, something he feared was now out of control? Because not long ago, Paul Heyman believed he had orchestrated Seth's downfall. It was Heyman, after all, who allegedly brokered the deal that brought Bronson Reed to Raw. Who, according to leaked booking sheets, insisted that the Money in the Bank briefcase stay in Seth's hands, only to have him ambushed weeks later and forced into hiatus. But what Heyman didn't anticipate was that Seth Rollins wouldn't return to reclaim his spot. He'd return to dismantle the entire structure. Backstage sources confirmed that shortly after the show ended, Heyman left Gorilla without a word, stepping into a private hallway where he took a phone call that lasted less than 45 seconds. When asked later by a staff member what the call was about, Heyman simply said, "Damage control. We're already behind." Elsewhere in the arena, Solo Sikoa was watching from the locker room, alone. Sources say the rest of his Bloodline entourage had already left the building. Solo had insisted on staying. He wanted to watch Raw end live. When Seth's music didn't play. When the lights fell. When Dragunov, Hayes, and McDonough appeared. He stood up. And when Seth Rollins appeared in that spotlight? He reportedly smiled. Not out of confidence. But out of recognition. Because Solo knows what it looks like when someone returns with fire in their chest. He's seen it before. In Roman. In Jay. In himself. And now, in Seth. After the show, Solo didn't make any statements. He didn't do any interviews. But a backstage technician confirmed that Solo walked into a private locker room, picked up a sledgehammer leaning against the wall, and slammed it once into a steel equipment case. Left a dent 3 inches deep. Then walked out. He didn't say a word. He didn't need to. Because Seth's return wasn't a provocation. It was a warning. And Solo understands one thing better than anyone: when someone like Seth stops talking, they've already decided what comes next. But perhaps the most haunting response came not from Solo or Heyman, but from Roman Reigns himself. Because the next morning, WWE PR received a direct message. Not from the company. Not from creative. From Roman. A single black and white photo. Of the Shield. Dean Ambrose. Roman Reigns. Seth Rollins. No caption. No explanation. Just the past. A reminder of what once was. And what might be again, if the wrong alliances form. Insiders say Roman has been watching from afar since his collapse. Healing. Recovering. Waiting for the right moment to return. But the moment Seth came back with a new empire behind him, everything changed. Because now Roman isn't watching Solo Sikoa spiral alone. Now, he's watching a new threat rise. A threat that doesn't come with family ties, but ideological conviction. And if Rollins' faction takes hold? If it starts dismantling the bloodline brick by brick? Then Roman Reigns may be forced to return. Not to reclaim the throne, but to stop a war. Elsewhere in the locker room, reactions were split. Some saw Seth's return as a breath of fresh air, finally, a real challenger to Solo's stranglehold over Raw. Others were more cautious. One veteran talent described it like this. This isn't just a return. It's a blueprint. Seth's not here to fight. He's here to restructure the power. He's trying to become what Roman was, before the crown poisoned him. The creative team, caught completely off guard by the reveal, is now scrambling to adjust SummerSlam plans. What was originally slated as Solo Sikoa vs. Bronson Reed, with Paul Heyman in the middle, is now being reworked. According to a leaked production draft, there are 3 possible main events being debated. Solo Sikoa vs. Seth Rollins, singles match for the undisputed championship. Faction warfare, Rollins, Dragunov, Hayes and McDonough vs. Solo, Reed and 2 surprise partners. Fatal 4-way, Solo vs. Seth vs. Reed vs. Roman, if cleared to return. But no matter the format, one thing is clear. The old structure is cracking. And Seth Rollins is the man holding the hammer. WWE staff have now reported additional sightings. Seth and his faction in closed-door meetings with executives, requesting full production control for their vignettes. Insisting on no scripts. No creative filters. Just a single line repeated in every pre-tape. The fire is coming. One source even claimed that Triple H, visibly tense after Monday Night Raw, muttered under his breath in a meeting. He's building something we can't control. And maybe that's the point. Because this isn't just about storylines. It's about control. Legacy. Power. For years, the Bloodline operated as WWE's dominant force. But what happens when a new ideology emerges, one that doesn't rely on family, but belief? What happens when someone like Seth Rollins stops chasing the throne and decides to burn it down? As we in